All right, welcome back to the final episode in the series. Don't sleep on these. This one's a little bit more bonus content. We are going over the our top 10 tier fives. Um,
And
so
who
yeah.
is we?
Oh,
Well, Adam, we is one of those things that's hard to define, right? Are we talking about the philosophical we or the specific we? Let's go specific. My name's Ian Morgan. You know me as the Brutta Master.
Yeah, coach of the Houston Haxorus. And
That's the
I'm
one.
Coach Adam Schmidt of the Punxsutawney Pacharitsu, also known as Black J32.
and this is your overlord, Coach Berditto.
Oh, I don't know if I signed up for that.
Ian, why don't you talk to us about what OVA is? Because I don't know anything
Oh,
about
sure.
anime.
Yeah. We were talking before this recording about what do we call this? What do we call this sort of video? And they were like it's like bonus content. It's like extras on a DVD. And sort of the thing that came to my mind is it's like an OVA in an anime. An OVA is like it's like an episode that comes out sometimes after the season is done. Like months after. Sometimes it's just a bonus episode. Whatever. It takes all of the characters from the anime and puts them in like fun fan servicey sort of things, right? So it's the beach episode, so to speak. And it was just like a fun.
It reminds me of
recontext
like
of what this is.
the last in Avatar: The Last Airbender. How like before they do the final boss, they go and they watch the
Oh, they watched the play.
the
Yeah,
play.
it's definitely comparable to that.
So this means as much to the plot of the Porch League. And if you're somehow watching this video and uh, don't know the Porch League, this is a series that we do, which is just going over the Pokemon that we have never drafted in our league. And so yeah, this is the tier five video. Basically, we are not going to go over every tier five. Tier
That
five
would
is
be
just
absurd.
every unlisted Pokemon.
Right. And in
And
addition to taking like 2 hours, let's be honest, don't draft Beat Barrel. Love Beat Barrel. Don't draft it.
so we basically each of the three of us went through and we ticked off maybe however many Pokemon we thought are on our list to maybe eventually get drafted in tier five. And we compared our list, and there were 7 Pokemon that were ticked off by more than one of us. So there's some consensus about these Pokemon should maybe be on your short list for tier fives, depending on what kind of team you have. And then we each picked an extra one just to round out, make it a top 10 list. Top 10 tier fives that have never been drafted in the Porch League.
Our top 10.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
and to be clear, like these are not actually top 10 tier 5s. I mean, that's totally up for debate. They're just our favorites. And it's not even our favorite tier 5 Pokemon. These are our favorites of the tier 5s that have never been drafted.
Right.
So this is our don't sleep on these tier 5s, our way to narrow down, the list of hundreds of viable tier 5 or viable or otherwise tier 5s.
Yeah.
Yeah, to sort of narrow down the list and also like help introduce like new faces into the league. Yeah, I think really probably the only other thing we want to say about tier fives before we get started. Just kind of remember, me and Adam have both written articles on this, but a tier 5 Pokemon is not a bad Pokemon. They fill a niche and they fill it very well. And when you're picking your tier 5s, obviously, you don't have to put a crazy amount of thought into it. You shouldn't be poring over it for like an hour, because it's probably a Pokemon that's not going to come very often.
Right.
But sort of on the flip side, since your tier 5 is probably your last or your second to last Pokemon that you're ever picking, it's patching up holes in your draft. So, as you're picking it, make sure you're thinking about, like, is this helping with type coverage? Is this going to give me more hazards or more hazard removal? Is this patching up my speed tiers? That sort of thing. And because you're doing that, your tier 5s, while they're not going to come super often, they end up being some of the most important in terms of, like, your draft on the whole. Because if you pick the wrong one, you're going to end up with too much of a... You're going to end up with something missing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's we've all seen a tier 5 that has changed a matchup in a given week. We've all seen teams that without that tier 5 wouldn't look as good. I'm thinking of like previously my use and then Andy's use of Alolan Golem. I'm thinking of Andy's use with Tauros. Adam, your
Yep.
team works really well with Tangela this season. Um, Obviously, there's other Pokemon like I would say one of the best tier 5s is Piloswine, and that gives
Yep.
you priority, that gives you Stealth Rocks. So these are kind of the things that we are looking to when we're thinking of potential tier 5s. Um, so, in no specific order, top 10, Adam, why don't you give us the name of the first one?
This is Kecleon, and this is my single selection. As Kyle mentioned earlier, we each got one Pokemon that two of the other people, kind of didn't necessarily agree with should be on this list. So Kecleon was mine. And why should you draft Kecleon? The biggest reason is it's a normal type with Protean. So that combined with base 120 special defense, Kecleon is actually quite bulky.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good assault vest user, and what part of what makes it Pokemon to have Protean is that it has such a wide. It gets things like knockoff. It gets Drain Punch. I think it gets all the elemental punches as well, Fire Punch, and it gets Flamethrower and Fire Blast. It gets things like Grass Knot. It gets things like Ice Beam,
Weird.
Iron Tail. It gets Knockoff. It gets Trick, and Trick gets you can run recycle sets with it. But it also has priority Sucker Punch and Shadow Sneak, as well as Stealth Rock. And so this is a really great Pokemon overall. And I got wrecked on the OU ladder against it a couple weeks ago, which is what put it on my radar. And I was doing some calcs with it earlier to kind of show what makes it so good. And so Assault Vest Kecleon versus a Specs Blacephalon. Specs Blacephalon is doing no more than 70% with something like a Fire Blast.
Wow.
Whereas Kecleon can OHKO with a Sucker Punch. After Stealth Rocks, it's always killing Shadow Sneak, Knockoff. And this is also great because as a normal Protean, you can switch in on Shadow Balls freely. It's just a really great Pokemon. So that's an example where Kecleon has a niche as a tier 5 that would really take down this tier 1. So do not sleep on Kecleon.
It's definitely more of a meme pick. And another disclaimer: if we say it's a really great Pokemon, also put that relative to the tier it's in, relative to the fact that it hasn't been drafted and stuff like that. I don't want people to get too excited about Kecleon. I feel like
it's like
I feel like half
Kecleon
of
is
this
great.
video is going to be us like getting too excited, and then the other two people are going to be like, "All right, it really
It's
is
not that good.
Yeah, it's just
Right.
a Kecleon, and it's
Yeah.
never been drafted." So my second, or the second one, number 2, is Vileplume. I'm actually surprised that part of me is surprised that Vileplume is tier 5. Because I think that its defensive stats are actually pretty good. Base 75 HP, 85 defense, 90 special defense. It gets recovery and synthesis. It also gets strength sap, which heals you to the target's attack. So you can run speed and it also lowers the attack of your opponent. So you can run like primarily speed and special defense. Its special defense is base 90. You could get it up to 306. And with a defensive typing like grass poison, it can actually like stay in on a lot of physical attackers, take a hit, strength sap, get at least 50% health back, and nerf its attack, the opponent's attack, all at the same time. So that's great. It's got mainly one ability and an effect spore, but it gets synthesis. It also gets, I think it gets moonlight as well. Yeah. It gets sleep powder, it gets sludge bomb, giga drain, and that like even just those that coverage, it's kind of like a Moongus in that it's a defensive Pokemon with a really high special attack. So you're still seeing things like an uninvested a Vileplume without any special attack investment, um, to maybe an offensive Tapu Koko is still doing like I think it's over 90. I'll put the calc up on the screen, but it's over 90% um, damage. Um, Obviously, it's like when is that scenario necessarily going to come into play? But you can imagine with a special attack stat as high as it is, it's going to give you some reliable chip on um, some Pokemon. So you should really think about drafting Vileplume. Um, the typing's great, the defense is great, um, and oftentimes you do see it perform really. It's one of like the best defensive Pokemon in NU. So think about that when you are considering filling out part of your defensive core with some lower tiers.
So Ian, why don't you tell us about your solo?
Yeah, so I chose Auroras, and I'm gonna have to start by just backing up. Auroras pretty bad on paper. A lot of bad stuff about Auroras. I can't deny that, right? Rock Ice is possibly the worst defensive typing. You have two quad weaknesses in fighting and steel, and then additionally, fire and ground and water, and so many other weaknesses. It's pretty bad, but. And I actually need to say two other bad things about it. The first is that despite having a special attack stat of 99, it doesn't know Power Gem, meaning that your only special rock move is either Hidden Power Rock or Ancient Power, and both of those are bad. And then finally, it has this really awesome ability, Refrigerate, which does the same thing as Pixelate or Aerialate. Or Galvanize. It takes a normal type move, multiplies it by 1.2 in power, and then makes it ice type. So that's great. That doesn't work with Z moves, as I found out this morning, and that applies to all those abilities. But I came into this thinking, oh, you could like hyper beam, refrigerate, Z move. You can't do that. So don't make that mistake if you do want to draft this thing and sort of use that as one of your Z users.
It does get nature power, which if you're running it on a terrain team, would like if you have a grassy terrain, nature power turns to what is that a
Energy
Oh,
grass
ball.
move,
really?
and then like electric terrain, it turns it into thunderbolt, stuff like that. But otherwise, it'll be an ice type tri attack without terrain. So
Interesting.
it's
Okay.
it's a weird it's a
Um,
weird tech.
Very, yeah. So yeah, let's get into some of the good stuff though now. It's got terrible defensive typing, but it does have acceptable bulk to sort of counteract that. It's got 123 HP for its base stat, 92 special defense, and then a 72 defense. So sort of, if you know what you're going up against, you can make it so that you can at least live like a surprise hidden power fighting or something.
Right.
Um, it is tied with Vanillux to be your cheapest option if you want to draft a team with Snow Warning on it. Um, it obviously, if you're using Snow Warning, then you're getting 100% Blizzard with that 99 special attack stab. That's very good. It's actually got a remarkably wide special move pool in those Dark Pulse, Flash Cannon, Psychic. Wish I could read my own handwriting. Thunderbolt,
Discharge.
Earth
Discharge. Yeah.
power.
Charge Beam was another one I wanted to mention if you're trying to do that sort of setup. And then it gets Freeze Dry, which is sort of like a great ice type move that not all ice types get. You can run Refrigerate with Hyper Voice. You can still run it with Hyper Beam and then Giga Impact if you're just looking for a nuke one time. Maybe this is your win condition. And then finally, in terms of some of the special moves, it gets Thunder Wave, Rocks, it gets Dual Screens, Haze, Encore if you're trying to be obnoxious. I think if there's ever a time you're going to draft or use Aurorus in competitive Pokemon, it's in Draft League because there's a lot that it can do. It can really catch your opponent by surprise, and you can sort of tweak it to a specific matchup.
Right.
So, yeah. If you want weather, if you want rocks, and if you want something reasonably bulky, I think this is a great choice.
Awesome. All right, so
Cool.
so now on to the 7 undisputed, agreed upon tier 5s that don't suck that haven't been drafted. And Adam, you got the first one.
Yeah, the first one is Crab. And something that's also worth mentioning about this video, and this is true for all of our Don't Sleep on These. These are just Pokemon that haven't been drafted, and so some people have had Pokemon that were they were received in a random draft, which we did for our first 3 or 4 seasons, and then some Pokemon have been traded for, like Vileplume, for example, has been previously. Crabominable is one of those Pokemon that was in a random draft way back when.
Oh yeah.
And this Pokemon, Fighting Ice, is incredible offensive. Now, it's not the best defensive, but it's incredible offensive stab. And it has base 123 attack. This is the PU wall breaker. So it's base 123 attack and Iron Fist. And it gets moves like Drain Punch. It gets moves like Earthquake, like Stone Edge, like Thunder Punch. This Pokemon is offensively, and its defensive, well, its typing is not the best, and its defenses aren't great. It can one of most things, and so you can actually really run this with like Custat Berry. It would be pretty nasty. 97 HP is enough to like push it over the edge on a lot of things.
Right.
But yeah, that's sort of why you should draft Crabominable.
Yeah. It would work really well too as a trick on a trick room team.
Yes.
As well, if you have something like Uxie or what's the tier 2 psychic, the big one?
Azelf.
Reuniclus?
No.
Reuniclus.
The levitating one. The duck.
Azelf.
The duck.
The duck.
Yeah.
Cresselia.
Cresselia.
Oh.
Oh my god.
It would work well with Cresselia.
Yeah, guys, we do know what we're talking about. We promise.
One of my other videos, I was just like, "Oh, what's that ghost ice thing?" so that's the content you get here. They're used to it at this point with the 2 videos I've posted.
So here's an example, though, of a calc that you might run on Crabominable, or like where you might see it useful on a team. So say someone has a defensive Zapdos, which is like an OU defensive staple. It's really can be difficult to break. Banded Crabominable is always killing with Ice Hammer.
Right.
No questions. You could probably, I didn't run the calc with Life Orb, but you might be killing with Life Orb, and it can take 2 Heat Waves from this defensive Zapdos set. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, there's a few staple wall breakers in the tier 5 list. Tauros being another one. Any guts Pokemon that can also potentially fit on a team. There's a few of those in.
We saw Girder work pretty well.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this just goes into that list, and like Adam said, Fighting Ice physical coverage is incredible, especially for a wall breaker. Mine is Lycanroc Midnight. Lycanroc Night gets a bad rap for being the worst of the Lycanrocs, primarily because its speed stat sucks. But
82.
Yeah, I mean, just
horrible.
compared to the other ones.
And I think what the other thing is, it's paired with not great bulk and another terrible defensive type.
Right. So if you can get it in freely, either with pivot options or like as a revenge killer or something like that, you can potentially even if something dies, you bring it in, you can run Swords Dance on it, and with no guard making all of your moves hit, base attack of 115. If you're running adamant, I don't have any calcs up now, but I'll make sure in post production I'll throw it up on the side. Look how much damage this thing is doing. But yeah, so I mean, even no guard Stone Edge is like as good as like no guard Hurricanes that Mega Pidgeot could give you, or something along that. So along that line, and with base speed 82, even just, I mean, it still gets. Oh, it doesn't get Accelerock. Whoa.
Yeah, that's Accelerock is exclusive only to Lycanroc Dusk.
Okay.
I think it's the only Pokemon that gets that, which is a bummer because it's a great move that
Well,
should
that's
be
why
able
this
to
one's
have.
tier 5. But
Okay, here's calc for you. Here's calc for you.
all right, I'll throw it up.
Lycanroc Midnight, Stone Edge to a uninvested Megalodios is always doing more than half.
Okay.
And with Scarf, you're faster.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So you switch in your Megalodios thinking you're gonna kill Lycanroc Midnight, but you can't because
Wow.
you take more than 50 from. So there you go.
Right,
Wow.
and as a reminder, you're not missing Stone Edge because you've got no guard.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's a good. I mean, it's also a stealth rocker. You could run Focus Sash. Like you could run a Sash with Stealth Rock and Endeavor, and you can kind of take advantage in the early matchup to get what you want. So I think it's a decent tier 5, and I think it should get drafted in the next 2 drafts. I'll say that.
One other thing I'll point out is against a slower team, if you think you can get away with a Z move, all the Lycanrocs have a unique one. If you run Lycanrocium or whatever it is with Stone Edge, you get this crazy powerful rock move. So
That's true.
an option, and because the other thing too is your tier 5
Yes.
is often going to end up being a Z user because of how we do our points. So something to think
Great.
about.
So, Ian, why don't you tell us about your next Pokemon?
Yeah, so I've chosen Cradilly as a Pokemon that I think fits really well in Tier 5. My sort of perspective for how good it is comes from my sort of ill-fated season playing Monotype. One of the weeks I had a Rock team, and so you're looking on the Smogon forums for what the best Rock Pokemon are, and Cradilly comes up on almost every team. Main reason for that is Storm Drain. In that context, it gives you a water immunity, which is crucial. But hey, let's not point out water immunity is great on any kind of team. It's as a tier 5, it's one of your cheapest options for a stealth rocker, and it gets recover, which is probably it's one of, if not the only rock Pokemon to get recover, to have that reliable recovery. So you send it out in front of something. You can use Infestation, which is a move that it gets to trap your opponent. You hit them with Toxic, and then if you've picked the right opponent, you're just going to keep recovering up as they get whittled down, can't switch out, etc. So, great for great to sort of be a wall against your opponent, to trap specific Pokemon that you're trying to make sure die in a specific way. Couple other neat things: it gets Mirror Coat. And as a reminder, Storm Drain doesn't just give you a water immunity, it also increases your special attack. So while Cradilly doesn't have a great special attack stat at 81 base power, a Giga Drain after that boost is going to do more than you'd expect. You can run Energy Ball if you're really trying to lean into the damage. You've got options, and again, in Draft League is when you can bring a crazy Cradilly set like that. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out just Cradilly's rock grass typing. I hope you didn't say this and I missed it. The rock grass typing is pretty good, actually. It's unique. No other Pokemon has rock grass typing, and it resists electric and normal, that's a surprisingly good defensive typing. And so it's just kind of interesting, and it's something that if your opponent's not specifically prepping for, might catch them off guard how bulky it is.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And
thanks.
Yeah, and kind of with going back to that Infestation, Recover, Toxic, and then fighting
probably Giga
Drain or something like that. With something like that, having a tier 5 with maybe a meme set or just like a unique set, probably the best thing about it is that your opponent has to figure out, has to build for it, like in a way that over prepares them for it, because I have to make sure I don't just lose to Infestation, Toxic, Recover, Cradilly. But you're because it's your tier 5, and if you draft it appropriately, you're never actually obligated to bring it. It's almost like having Ditto or something. Like the quintessential example is Ditto, where it's just having it on your team makes your opponent prep for it. Adam's Tangela. It's Adam's never tied to bringing his Tangela but
Mhm.
just having it on the team is just like, gosh, I got to make sure I don't lose to this annoying tier 5. So,
Right. And the other example, even within the tier, is Pyukumuku, but Cradily is so much harder to
Mm,
prep for because Pyukumuku, you bring a powerful grass, you bring a powerful electric, you're done, you deal with it.
yeah, you bring taunt.
Cradily, because it's
Yeah.
yeah, that too. And Cradily is still weak to taunt, but because its defensive typing is still so much better, and because it actually has offensive moves,
Right.
it's a
And
better
hazards.
Pyukumuku.
Exactly. All right, Adam. We're into the top 4.
yeah. Next up is, well, these weren't in an order,
Yeah.
but the
Last
last four.
4.
Yeah, next up we have Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime, maybe you don't remember it because it was all the way back in Gen 1 and you've never looked at it since then.
Or maybe
Mr.
you
Mime.
don't ever want to think about it because it is a crime against God.
But it's in the Detective
um,
Pikachu movie.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it
that's
was
so
a crime
cute.
against God there too.
But Mr. Mime has actually picked up a fairy typing since you last looked at it, probably. And this makes it a lot better. So Psychic Fairy is a great typing. Immune to Dragon is great. And Mr. Mime, sort of like Kecleon I was saying before, actually has the same special defense and HP as Kecleon. That's funny. 120 special defense, 40 HP. But 90 base speed is pretty cool. And this Pokemon has 3 great abilities: Technician, Soundproof, and Filter, which means you only take 75% from super effective. It has an awesome move pool too. Gets Nasty Plot, gets Focus Blast, Dazzling Gleam, Psy Shock, so you can use it as an offensive setup. It gets really incredible supports like Healing Wish, like Trick and Trick. Like I believe it gets Magic Bounce as well, which is sorry, not Magic Bounce. What's the one? It doesn't matter. It gets
Magic Coat.
Magic Coat. That is the word. Um, yeah, so it's kind of fun. You can run a power swap as that. Yep.
Yep.
It gets Psychic Terrain.
Skill
So it
swap.
has skill swap. So it's got kind of these fun techs. And it's great typing, great abilities, pretty good defense. Let me pull up this calc that so we all know how scary Mega Gardevoir is offensively, and it's funny. These are like 2 of the second. Mega Gardevoir is nasty because it can freely click Pixelate Hyper Voice in front of almost anything, except for Mr. Mime with Soundproof can kind of this Hyper Voice take no damage because immune to the voice, and you could either kind of nasty up attacking on if you don't think Psyshock, because not your otherwise you can Healing Wish thing a lot. Something that's faster and can take out Mega Guard. So it's an example of some time that you might want to bring Mr. Mime against really.
Yeah, Adam, you're cutting out, but just to finish up about Mr. Mime, if it's another Pokemon that for it being a tier 5, it's a cheap Z user with all the coverage moves that it gets that Gen 1 Pokemon get. Um, it it can really use those Z options. Base 90 speed is great for a tier 5. Base 100 special attack with Nasty Plot is very workable. So don't sleep on Mr. Mime. And then
Yeah.
Yeah.
with Pinsir, we actually I'm surprised no one's drafted Pinsir yet. And that's partially due to the fact that our league previously had a mega clause where if the mega was drafted, the non mega couldn't be drafted. So keep that in mind. But Pinsir itself has 3 very usable abilities with Hypercutter, Mold Breaker, Moxie. I think Pinsir is a decent revenge killer, especially late game with base 125 special attack and quick attack. You could run Moxie with that, or you could like Hypercutter. You can do Hypercutter with Swords Dance, and you're not worried about your like them switching into a Intimidate Pokemon. It's a tier 5 with knockoff, which is nice. It gets Facade. I think a lot of Pokemon do, but that's always nice to see. Its physical coverage isn't that great, but it has what it needs. It has X Scissor as stab. It has Stone Edge and Earthquake. So
It's got close combat for the rock types that are going to be coming in.
yeah, exactly. So you have the coverage that you need with coverage for rock Pokemon. It has coverage for flying Pokemon. Gets quick attack. This is just a. I mean, there's weird tech that you can do with scarfing it with throat chop and all sorts of other things for it just being a tier 5. Um, if you drafted this on the right team, I could actually see it performing really well for you.
Definitely. And one other thing I'll mention, Kyle, you kind of alluded to it with Mr. Mime, but as a rule, the older a Pokemon is, the wider its move pool is, because it keeps it, Gen 1 Pokemon in general started with just a crazy amount of moves, and then they kept getting the new moves from every generation. So,
Yeah.
Pinsir, Mr. Mime, they have really wide move pools, but if even a lot of the ones that we didn't talk about, there's a lot of tier 1s, or tier 5 Pokemon from Gen 1 that just have all these moves that you never think they'd have. If you need another good example of that, look to the way Chris used Lapras last season.
Yeah.
Or this season, I don't remember which one it was, but yeah. So Pinsir, great choice.
Yeah, I'm showing some of the status moves it gets. String Shot is a weird one. It's a bug Pokemon with Stealth Rocks. So it's a
What?
yeah, it gets Stealth Rock. It gets Stealth Rock and it's not work. It's resisted Earthquake, which
Yeah.
could be
Wow.
useful on your team. So yeah, there's a couple things that you can do with Pinsir. Don't sleep on Pinsir. It will hurt.
Yeah. Don't do
Great.
that. And these next two that I'm gonna sort of do sort of like a compare contrast kind of thing are both electric types. And they won't let you sleep on them if electric terrain is up.
Boom.
That's your terrain joke for the day, and also a reminder of how that works. Anyways, now that I've said all that, let's start talking about Togedemaru, who, as we discussed, we've seen Togedemaru just last season. Andy took it mid-season, and brought it on as his tier 5. And it's pretty good. It's got 3 cool abilities, one of which you're never going to use. Lightning Rod gives it an immunity to electric attacks, but it was already quad resisting them, and its special attack is base 40. Don't use Lightning Rod. So it's got 2 great abilities for it. Iron Barbs, which obviously means that if you contact Togedemaru, you're going to take some significant damage. And then Sturdy, which means that you don't have to run a Focus Sash on it. Which is good, because it's got a quad ground weakness. But here are the things that are great about Togedemaru. With 96 base speed, it's at a great scarfing range. And this is combined with a pretty good physical offensive move pool. So you get U-turn. If you want the stab, you can do Volt Switch as an option, although, again, you're never going to do any damage output with that. That's purely just utility. You get Stab Iron Head, which is great. It gets a move called Zippy Zap, which is exactly the same thing as Iron Head, but it's Stab Electric. So, no, not Zippy Zap. I'm sorry. It's called Zing Zap. But yeah, 30% chance to flinch the target, 80 base power, 100% accuracy, electric. Great move for Togedemaru. It gets Poison Jab. It gets Zen Headbutt. I want to mention that it gets Fell Stinger, which is a move where if you KO the opponent with Fell Stinger, your attack is multiplied by 2.5, or it goes up 3 stages. So, unlikely to work on Togedemaru, but you can try it. And then just some utility stuff that it gets. It gets Thunder Wave, obviously. If you don't want to touch your opponent. If you do want to touch your opponent, it gets a move called Nuzzle, which most of the cute little electric rodents have. Is a move that's guaranteed to hit, does just a little bit of damage, and then always paralyzes.
Right.
So you can break a Sash, you can break Sturdy, and you can paralyze your opponent, meaning then you can follow that up with Zing Zap or whatever else you do.
Right.
And finally, it gets Spiky Shield, so you can protect yourself sort of twice from damage, and then do some offensive damage there as well.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone here watch or how many of you watch Pokemon videos, but he recently did the NU to the top, or road to top 10 for the never used tier, and Togedemaru was on not only most of his teams, but most of the teams in the like upper echelon, with like choice scarf, lightning rod, it can just absorb.
Mm,
It can absorb
Yeah.
volt switches, which usually your opponent is using to gain momentum, so that you can switch in your Togedemaru, absorb that, and like let's say they're scarfed, then they have to then hard switch out, and you can just U-turn into something else.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a solid it's a solid tier 5, and it's an electric type, which you should get on your team.
yep.
Definitely.
So what if
So
you
to
wanted a
amend my,
different electric type?
I'm getting there. I want to amend one thing about
Okay.
Togedemaru. You can run Lightning Rod on it. Don't run it for the offensive capability. That's not going to do anything. Run Lightning Rod for the immediate.
Yeah.
But Adam, I like the question. What if you don't want Togedemaru? Another option you have available to you is Zebstrika, who actually kind of does some similar things in terms of immunities. Because the best thing, as far as I'm concerned about Zebstrika, is its ability. All three are granting it an immunity. So first you ask yourself, do I want a grass immunity or an electric immunity? If you want grass, you go Sap Sipper, and if you want electric, you can go Lightning Rod or Motor Drive. But you can also approach this from terms of a stat boosting sort of thing. Do I want my attack to go up? Take Sap Sipper, and predict an opponent's grass type attack. Do I want my special attack or speed to go up? Predict an electric attack, and then take either Lightning or Motor Drive. So basically, you're either giving yourself a free band, scarf, or specs without being choice locked. So all that, if you can position it well, all that stuff is going to really benefit you. Now, probably the biggest weakness of Zebstrika is move, because it's got higher attack than special attack, but it's got a way wider special offensive move pool than it does a physical offensive move pool,
Right.
and they're both pretty shallow. So I just sort of as an example, if you wanted to run an offensive set, a great option, this is the Smogon option to be just sort of up front, you could run Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Overheat, and then whatever hidden power you need for coverage. You pair that with Lightning Rod, so you switch into an obvious Volt Switch or something. You've upped yourself, then you pair that with Life Orb, and you're just going to put out a crazy amount of damage. You don't have a lot of options for coverage, but no one wants to come into a Stab, Thunderbolt, Life Orb plus one stage. And sort of then by comparison, if you want to do physical, you can run Flame Charge, Double Edge, Wild Charge, maybe like Pursuit, which is a move that Zebstrika gets. Your other option besides Pursuit would probably be like Bounce, which, if you make it a Z user, that Z Fly could really help. But yeah, so Zebstrika is weird. It comes, it's probably one of the most narrow of the mons that we've looked at today in terms of like how you're going to have to use it, but there's still a little bit of room to play around. Your opponent's not going to know exactly what to prep for because of its three abilities, all granting an immunity.
Right.
Good thing, and the other thing, it's going to give you a speed of 116, so that can really help your speed tiers too.
Exactly. Yeah, having something up there is, I mean, a lot of those fast Pokemon are like, I think it's base speed 115 that can run positive attack natures on your base 100s. So 116 puts you above that. It's like you said, its special coverage isn't amazing, but it's still actually fine. It's like Jolteon is tier 3 and really only benefits from Shadow Ball and Signal Beam coverage, and
Which actually, Zebstrika also gets Signal Beam if you
yeah, it
really
gets
wanted to
Signal
do that.
Beam,
So
and Manectric usually runs Hidden Power and Overheat. So
yeah,
it's like
Yep.
it's kind of routine when it comes to fast electric type move pools.
definitely.
It's
I think an unfortunate difference is that it's only got 80 base special attack, whereas those guys are like focusing on their special attack.
exactly.
But
Yep.
that's why
For
it's
tier
tier 5.
5, yeah.
Yeah, it's not even the best tier 5 fast electric behind Electrode, I would say.
Yeah, or
but
even Raichu.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, these are, some things to think about, especially if some of your other tier 5 options get sniped. You want to, have some thoughts on,
Exactly.
what else you can go.
Yeah, or maybe you drafted Mega Aerodactyl and you don't need something as fast as Electrode. This is a good option.
Right.
That's absolutely true.
The last thing I'll say about Zebstrika is that it's shiny is terrible. So if you're getting,
Is it one
oh
of the
my
green
gosh,
ones?
Kraydillies is awesome.
Yeah, Cradillies rules.
No, Zebstrika's is one of those that looks like it barely changes. Like it almost looks like I turned on night
you
night
turned on
mode
night mode.
night
Yeah.
mode on my phone. So if you're
That
worried
is not
about
great.
if you're worried about your sleep hygiene, throw on the shiny version of Zebstrika,
Oh
and don't
my
get that
boy.
extra blue light in
Gosh,
your
that's
eyes
so
before you go to bed.
bad.
Oh my.
So these are your top 10 tier 5s that have never been drafted. And we hope you liked the video. Like we said, this was bonus content, more for entertainment than anything. Um, you got 2 more drafts before Sword and Shields comes out, and everything changes for the best and for the worst. We don't know exactly what the Pokedex will look like. So if any of these are Pokemon or any other tier 5 or any other Pokemon in the draft is something that you're like, gosh, I want to try this out, use the next 2 stages in our league to pick them up, because we're doing this for fun anyway. You might as well have fun 2 last times for this generation.
Absolutely. And then we're on to bigger and better things.
Right. So
Literally, because you will have to Dynamax a Pokemon once again.
and there'll be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would say comment in the comment section of this video or on the server some other tier 5s that you like that are usually on your short list. What are some tier 5s that you want to grab before before Gen 8 comes out?
Yeah, remind me that Minun was a mistake and that I really shouldn't have drafted it. All acceptable.
And like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more great content like this.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye.
Peace.